and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment of Cowboy State Politics Live from very, very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday, opening day of the 2025 Major League Baseball season. I can't tell you how excited I am. I'm pretty stoked about how the Texas Rangers are looking this year. My feeling is, and of course, we got 160 games to go, so you really don't know how things are going to turn out until, September. But I got a good feeling about it. They've got a lot of good players, so we're going to talk about that this morning, as well as a curious article that was put together by the Federalist, exposing that a third of all D.C. district judges were not born in the United States, and all of them have their fingerprints on one of these Trump cases. So that's a fascinating piece in the Federalist we're going to talk about. And shockingly, and maybe we need to have some celebratory music, but climate change is no longer on the list of big threats to the United States. Oh, yes, my friends, no more climate change.
Happy days are here again.
Indeed, my friends. So Tulsi Gabbard has taken care of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's some great sound bites from Senator Angus King. He can't believe that climate change isn't on the list of threats facing the United States. Fascinating. And then, as you might have guessed, we have a number of criminals that are wandering around our country, and all of them, not all of them, I should say, a bunch of them, were allowed to walk right through the gates by the Biden administration. Now, ICE, and I think it was just yesterday, arrested 600 already convicted criminals that are wandering around in Houston, who definitely crossed over the southern border. So lots to talk about this morning, as well as, and I know this is going to come as a giant surprise to all of you, but the abortion lawsuit has been refiled in Natrona County. Who saw that one coming? I mean, really, it's not like they've filed any lawsuits before. Fascinating stuff, my friends. But we begin with the judges in D.C. from the Federalist. Of all the judges in the U.S., all 5 foreign-born judges of the D.C. court managed to get their fingerprints on controversial Trump cases. Now, this is interesting because, you would think that the way cases are supposed to be handed out are just kind of on a wheel, right? Judges get cases at random. They're not specifically chosen to pick a particular case. And if they are, it's a clear indication of what I've been talking about, all this week and really a bunch of times last week, that there's a bunch of judge shopping going on. And it's not just judge shopping that happens in, our nation's capital. It's all across the United States. Though not related to immigration or the Trump administration, we saw a case of it just last week. Well, 2 weeks ago, when the abortion clinic filed their lawsuit in Teton County to get in front of Judge Melissa Owens, because she's the judge that threw out the abortion ban the bans on abortion and unilaterally legislated from her bench saying that abortion is health care. So, of course, they want to get that case in front of her. Fortunately, and I'm going to argue that God worked on Judge Owens's heart a little bit, and she threw that lawsuit out of her court and said you had to file in Natrona County. But we're going to get there a little bit later. I just used that as an example to say that there's an enormous amount of judge shopping that goes on. From the Federalist piece, and I quote, "The United States District Court for the District of Columbia, the source of many of the cases interfering with President Donald Trump's authority, has 15 judges. Count them, 15. And 5 of them were born outside the United States. While country of origin doesn't come up in most jobs, it is worth asking if judges with ties to foreign nations and cultures are the right ones to be making decisions affecting the United States military or immigration. The concept of foreign-born judges is a newer phenomenon in the district. In addition to its 15 main judges, the district has 10 older senior judges who still occasionally hear cases in the district. This group, nominated as far back as Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, were all born in the United States. But starting in 2014, former President Barack Obama appointed Judge Tanya Chutkan, we remember her, don't we, of Kingston, Jamaica. She was in the U.S. by 1979, attending George Washington University. Before sitting on the federal court, she had no experience as a judge. Chutkan is overseeing the legal challenge to DOJ's work to slash government spending. Interesting how she got assigned to that particular case. Anyway, Obama also appointed Judge Amit Mehta to the D.C. court. Mehta also has no previous experience as a judge. He was born at Patan, Gujarat, India. He and his parents came to the U.S. when he was a baby, age 1. He was raised in Maryland. Mehta will oversee 4 January 6th civil cases that aim to blame Trump for injuries and squeeze money, court time, and political embarrassment out of him. The other 3 foreign-born judges were nominated by former President Joe Biden. Judge Ana Cecilia Reyes was nominated in 2021, also with no prior experience as a judge. She was born in Montevideo, Uruguay, and moved to Spain, and while still a child, moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where she grew up. She is the first openly LGBTQ ZXPWDS Latina to be appointed to this court. Reyes presided over an objection to Trump's executive order declaring that gender dysphoria is inconsistent with the high standards of troop readiness. And the Federalist Sean Fleetwood reported on that one. So there are a number of judges on the D.C. Circuit that were never born here. Now, I'm not saying that a person that has come to the United States and assimilated into our culture is incapable of judging a case. I think that that's kind of a specious argument. And I think that it runs contrary to a lot of the beliefs of many conservatives, that your essential characteristics should not be a qualification for any sort of job or a scholarship or anything like that. I mean, that kind of runs counter to it. But it is interesting that all of the foreign-born judges on the D.C. Circuit have their fingerprints on a Trump case. Now, I would say that this is only a statistical coincidence at this point. I think it is interesting that all 4 of them are pretty much ruling against the Trump administration. I think that's a pretty good indication of what's happening. But again, I think that we should look at this piece with a bit of skepticism. While it is kind of an interesting coincidence, and again, there are no coincidences in politics. It's just a word I have to use to describe what's going on. But it's interesting. However, we have to judge. We have to judge these judges on their merit. Continuing with the article, that's my opinion anyway. Continuing, the first Muslim and Arab American in the D.C. Circuit, Judge Amir Hatem Mahdi Ali, was born and raised in Canada to Egyptian parents, according to his questionnaire for judicial nominees. Ali was not required to register for selective service. That's because he was not a citizen until 2019. He graduated from the University of Waterloo, and this is probably the most egregious case that I'm talking about with this piece. But he graduated from Waterloo in Ontario with a software engineering degree in 2008, and then attended Harvard Law School in the U.S., graduating in 2011. He worked as a volunteer on Biden's 2020 transition team. Repaying political favors. and given them, virtually lifetime appointments. Let's see here. He worked as a volunteer on Biden's campaign. He worked for some nonprofits, but never served as a judge until Biden appointed him in 2024. Amir has written extensively and negatively about the Trump's so-called travel ban, a 2017 executive order which restricted travel to the U.S. from 7 predominantly Muslim countries in the first 90 days. So you might be getting the impression that a lot of these judges were nominated because as a response to specific Trump policies, in this case with Ali, to the travel ban. Let's see here. In his writing, he said that prejudice and tolerance were the very hallmark intolerance were the very hallmark of Trump's campaign against Muslims. And he gets appointed to the D.C. Circuit. Anyway, before he was a judge, Ali spoke at the National Press Foundation and gave tips to reporters on how to cover the courts. All single-handedly, let's see here. When confirmed, Amir was a member of the Capital Area Muslim Bar Association. I didn't even know that there was such a thing. I mean, obviously, there's the Bar Association. We have that in every state. But a Muslim Bar Association? Anyway, let's see here. I mean, the article goes on to explain how, a lot of these judges are, absolutely, not born in the United States. But again, I did say we need to look at that with skepticism and judge these people on their merits. And you can find out whether they're biased, regardless of looking at, their family history of where they grew up. But I think in this last case of Amir, he went to law school at Harvard in 2017. And then he was nominated in 2021. So, it was 2021, wasn't it? Anyway. So my point is that he hasn't really been in the U.S. for very long. He was educated outside of the country. So he is probably the worst example of, or the best example, depending on how you look at it, of foreign-born judges. Now, of course, in our legal system, we want our judges to be unbiased. We want them to be able to weigh cases regardless of their own personal inclinations. But what we've seen recently is a lot of lower court judges, district court judges, that are issuing nationwide injunctions against the Trump administration when they don't really have the jurisdiction to do that. This is a relatively new phenomenon. Usually a district judge would issue an injunction. And I mean, this was before, the Trump derangement syndrome, but they would issue an injunction just in their circuit. So it only applied to, the area in which they covered, didn't apply nationally. And think about it. Why would a judge of a federal court that only handles cases in a particular area of the country have the authority to issue an injunction nationwide? They don't have any connection to any of the other districts. It is just a judicial power grab. And I think that a lot, and this is the reason why I led with this story this morning, because I've heard a lot of people commenting on social media and just, that I meet on the street that, they're absolutely at their wits' end with all of these judges inserting themselves into the Trump administration. You see, we have 3 co-equal branches of government: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. Legislative body makes the laws. The executive branch executes the law, and the judicial branch administers the law, judges that in that case. But it is not the job of the judiciary to create law out of whole cloth or to what I call legislate from the bench, which is what you're seeing with a lot of these rulings that are coming out. And the fact is that most of these rulings, they should be handled by the legislature. A judge can look at a case and say, well, this law is overly vague, and so the legislature needs to take a look at it. It doesn't cover this case, or it could say that this one absolutely violates the Constitution. But the way that our system works is it is not the judge that decides whether a law, whether they can change a law from the bench. The way our system is designed is if the court strikes down a law, then the legislature can go back, rewrite the law, and pass it again and make it constitutional. This is where a lot of severability clauses come from in a lot of legislation. You'll see that if you look at a lot of the bills from the 2025 legislative session in Wyoming, you'll see several examples of where there is a severability clause. And what that means is if one part of the law is struck down, it doesn't strike down the entire law. But to get some perspective on this, let's talk to our friend Jerry in Rock Springs. How's it going this morning, Jerry?
It's going nice, man. It's going real good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's beautiful weather up here. It's Thursday, opening day of baseball season. I don't see how things could get any better.
Well, we could get rid of some of these judges.
So what's your take on all these, Jerry?
Well, man, I served in the military in Rock Springs, Wyoming. We're very diverse. And then I have met some great immigrants throughout my whole life. And I'm afraid that we're headed to labeling all immigrant judges as bad. And maybe we need to get back to the people voting for these, not an elected president, especially the one that proved they're not capable of doing this 100% of the time.
No, I agree. And that's one of my fears with this piece in the Federalist, because it kind of leads you to believe that just because you're born somewhere else, that you're somehow biased. A lot of these judges, their parents moved them to the United States when they were young children. So, I mean, I really don't think that where somebody is born really indicates how they're going to rule on a case. But that last example of the guy that was educated in Canada and got his law license when he was 2017. I mean, that one there kind of raises some questions for me. I think the bigger question, Jerry, is all of these judges that have decided that they themselves can create law for the entire country. I mean, I looked at a table when I was preparing for this segment that in Obama's entire administration, he had 15 federal injunctions, nationwide injunctions. In Trump's first term, he had 64, and already this term, I think it said he's got 15 federal injunctions against him. So, I mean, the courts are really playing politics here, aren't they?
Yes, that's more than I believe the last 4 presidents besides Trump have had total.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're right.
I think we can have, these judges that come in that believe in America and they want to become part of America. And we need some way to distinguish. Even if you got to start putting their politics up there, usually a judge is listed non-political. Start putting up there if they're a communist or a Democrat or a Republican.
Well, I used to think what I was going to say is my opinion on this has kind of gone back and forth. I used to think that if you're a judge, who you were appointed by really shouldn't figure into it. That, I mean, we've had lots of Supreme Court justices that were, nominated by a good one, John Roberts. He was nominated by George W. Bush, and he has not been a conservative judge like we thought he was going to be. So just because, and maybe he is reflective of George Bush, but, I mean, there's been a lot of cases where conservatives have dominated judges and they haven't really turned out exactly as planned. But I mean, I guess what's the solution? I mean, our system is set up with advice and consent from the Senate. So the Senate confirms judges. So what do you think about, having some sort of retention statute that after you're on the bench for a while, you have to stand for retention like we do all of our judges in Wyoming?
That I think some places have that. Wyoming, we don't. But yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jerry, I got to run to a break, man. But thanks for calling in, and have a good rest of your afternoon, my friend.
Hey, you too, and God bless our republic.
God bless our republic. We'll be back in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. You can listen to the program on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. Don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast, which is broadcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And if you've been paying attention to the show, there's a big story I've been covering with our local news outlet here in Sheridan. For the fourth day in a row, the Sheridan Press has not printed a retraction of their absolutely false claim that said that the County Republican Party screwed up the notice for their meeting. I may have some updates coming up on that maybe tomorrow. Not sure yet, but just a perfect example of what the media does. They inject themselves into politics, and in my personal opinion, this is absolutely a case of the Sheridan Press trying to interfere in a private election. This is going to be a big story, and I mean, I've been covering it, and as far as I've been told, man, the Sheridan Press, once that first story broke on Monday, they were huddled up with their lawyers trying to figure a way out of it. And the truth is, the only way out of it is for them to print a retraction. And again, for 4 straight days, they have not done so. But, this program, I'm probably not going to forget about that. Because at one point, they published a piece in their paper that straight out called me a liar. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, Ashley Snoozy. Not going to forget about you. Well, moving on to some more fun stuff. Today is the opening day of baseball season, or at least it is at Arlington for the Texas Rangers. And to commemorate today, I found this a while ago, but it's a recreation of the old Abbott and Costello Who's on First. And I've always loved that skit, and this one's a new one, and you'll probably recognize some different voices in it. So let's go ahead and give it a listen. It's a little bit long, but it's opening day. I say, why the heck not? Listen to this.
Oh! I tell you, Jimmy, you know what I love, Jimmy? I love baseball. When we get to St. Louis, will you tell me the guys' names on the team so when I see them in that big St. Louis ballpark, I'll be able to know those fellas?
All right, but strange as it may seem, they give these ball players nowadays very peculiar names.
Funny names.
Nicknames, pet names. Now, on the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
That's what I'm trying to find out.
I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
You know the fellow's names?
Yes.
And who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean the fellow on first base.
Who?
The fellow played first base for St. Ouis.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who's on first?
Why are you asking me for?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you who is on first.
You guys talking about me?
Billy Crystal.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we are. This is who?
How should I know? I never met the guy.
Well, now you've met him.
Met who?
Yes.
Look. Would you tell me your name?
Who?
You.
Who?
Him.
Me?
Yes.
Who?
What is your name?
No. What's on second? This is who?
That's what I'm trying to find out.
All right, calm down, will you?
Okay, listen. When I say hello to this fella right here, I'm saying hello to who?
Hello, nice to meet you.
See, now you're starting to get it.
Get what?
I'm right here.
And who are you?
I'm who?
What?
Yes?
Who's this fella?
No, who is that fella?
I am who? Who am I?
How am I supposed to know? What's your name?
Now, what is his name?
I'm not asking you what his name is. I'm asking you, who is this fella right here?
That's right.
But what's his name?
What is my name?
You don't know your name.
Of course I do.
Well, then tell me.
What?
Your name.
What?
What's wrong with this guy?
Who?
What? Yes?
Oh, I think he's got a hearing problem.
Who?
What? Yes?
Look.
Can't you see I'm talking to him?
Who? What?
Who?
What?
Who?
What?
Who?
What? Boys, settle down. Now then, I'm glad that's all cleared up. He's who and what's his name?
I don't know.
All right, gentlemen, I couldn't help over here. Look, it's very simple. This fella's actual name is who? W-H-O. And this fella's actual given birth name is what? W-H-A-T.
Well, that clears it up. Why didn't you just say that in the first place? But wait, who are you?
I don't know.
Third base!
Classic skit from Abbott and Costello. Like I said, it's opening day for the Texas Rangers. They're playing the Boston Red Sox, and I think the game starts at 2:05 Mountain Time. But games are going to be starting all across the fruited plain, and it's a great season. And as you all know, I absolutely love baseball. So let's hear. Moving on. ICE agents, I told you before the program started that ICE agents in Houston have arrested more than 600 criminal non-citizens, including many that were previously deported. Now, we all know this. Every state has become a border state. Even in Wyoming, there are a number of illegal immigrants that, we're not talking 600, but there's a lot of them that have been arrested. And we've got a number of sheriffs who have, maybe not openly said that they're not going to follow what ICE says, but they've definitely made that indication, with the exception of Matt Carr in Teton County. I've got some audio of him absolutely openly admitting that he is not going to detain illegal immigrants. Now, of course, the audio was taken before Trump was elected, or maybe shortly thereafter. But it's pretty shocking that you have a Wyoming sheriff, albeit in Teton County, saying that, he's not going to follow detainers. Now, since then, he's kind of walked that back and said that he's going to play ball with ICE agents. But we are arresting illegal aliens in Wyoming, though not to the degree they are in Houston. So let's see here. I think this one was from maybe the Federalist, not sure. Anyway, ICE agents in Houston arrest more than 600 criminal non-citizens, including many that had been previously reported. Quote, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents based in Houston continue to arrest and remove violent criminals illegally in the U.S. in several targeted operations. Agents arrested more than 600 criminal foreign nationals, including scores who were previously deported multiple times, confirmed gang members, sex offenders, and fugitives. ICE agents recently removed Oberlin Benitez Carabajal, a criminal Mexican national previously deported and convicted of manslaughter. He was returned to Mexico last week after previously being deported in 2014 and illegally re-entering the country last January. His criminal record includes manslaughter and assault in Travis County, driving while intoxicated in Austin, and illegal entry in West Texas in January of 2024. An 8-time removed Mexican national, removed 8 times, and tell me that we don't have a problem at our southern border. An 8-time removed Mexican national, Baltazar Pendajo Calderon, was also removed from the U.S. this month. He was convicted on charges of kidnapping, driving while intoxicated, illegal entry, and resisting arrest. Each time he illegally entered the U.S., he was caught and returned to Mexico, including this month. Another Mexican national, Leticia Cabarajo Guadalajara, was removed to Mexico this month after having been removed 6 times, going back to 2002. Her criminal record includes 14 convictions, including 6 DWIs, 6 for theft or larceny, and 2 for refusing to provide identification to law enforcement. In his more than 30-year career, ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations Houston Field Office Director Brett Bradford said few things surprise him, but Guadarrama's actions were shocking. After repeatedly entering the country illegally and getting behind the wheel intoxicated, she has victimized hardworking Texans over and over again by stealing their money and property, and then attempted to avoid accountability by refusing to provide identification. And the list goes on. Here's another quick list here. 140 of those 600 were charged or convicted of aggravated felony violent crimes like homicide, assault, or domestic violence. 34 were charged or convicted of sex offenses, 38 of illegal firearms offenses, 52 were charged with narcotics, 51 with property crimes such as burglary or theft, and 93 of them were charged and convicted of driving while intoxicated. So we're not talking about the poor immigrants that the Democrats always try to tell us, they're just poor and downtrodden. We have to have compassion. Yeah, my compassion ran out after the first or fifth or 93rd conviction or whatever the case may be. The point is, my friends, that we do have a problem with illegal immigration in this country, and there's 600 reasons to support that claim. Every state's got this problem, and every state needs to work to solve it, even Wyoming. We'll be back in a minute.
Here at U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Wyoming's conservative voice, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time, a record that nobody in the Wyoming media can even come close to. Did you know that we're still spending money? Well, up until like yesterday, we were still spending money because of COVID, that we still were suffering the effects of the pandemic. From the Daily Caller, Trump administration revokes billions in COVID spending. And I quote, 5 years after the first COVID-19 stay-at-home order, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will pull back billions in pandemic spending from state and local public health departments, nonprofits, and international partners, the Department of Health and Human Services said on Tuesday. HHS confirmed to the Daily Caller that as much as $11 billion could be cut in grants and cooperative agreements identified by the CDC as no longer necessary. We are at the very least 3 years removed from the pandemic, and still there are states that are spending money and using COVID to justify it. Really, all of that COVID spending, all of the ARPA money, all of the CARES funding, really was an attempt to grow the size of government at an exponential rate. Remember what Rahm Emanuel said during the Obama administration: never let a crisis go to waste. And the Democrats definitely did not. They grew government at a rate that was just breathtaking. Many of us, and I remember sitting in the Wyoming Capitol, and there was $791 million in, I believe that was CARES money that they were debating. And they were spending, and I wish I would have done the math on it, but it felt like they were spending about $1 million a minute. And I mean, it was amazing. They blew money on anything that was not nailed down, and even on ridiculous things that had nothing to do with COVID. Well, just about every state did that because they were awash in money. And states expanded their state services because the federal government was picking up the tab. And now we've got these huge agencies, or probably more of the same agency, but they've become bloated because they've had this spigot of money that has not been turned off. And I quote, back to the article, the COVID-19 pandemic is over, and HHS will no longer waste billions of taxpayer dollars responding to a non-existent pandemic that Americans moved on from years ago. HHS Director of Communications Andrew Nixon said in a statement to NBC News. HHS is prioritizing funding projects that will deliver on President Trump's mandate to address our chronic disease epidemic and make America healthy again. The Biden administration ended the COVID-19 public health emergency on May 11th of 2023, at which time it folded some emergency COVID-19 programs into its existing structure. So that's right there, that the Biden administration folded its COVID-19 programs into existing structures. So what that tells you is they used the pandemic as a reason to expand government and create all these different and various agencies. And then those agencies were then folded into existing agencies that existed before the pandemic. But they never eliminated any of those programs. And so the breadth and scope of government, and the biggest place we saw this, and this I think is pretty understandable, but where we saw the biggest implosion or explosion of government was in our health department. Now, the Wyoming Health Department, I think I was told that it takes up like a third of Wyoming's budget. I mean, a huge amount of money. Well, it's dramatically bigger now than it was before. I remember sitting in the legislative session, and it's just one bill after another. Money for the health department, money for the health department, money for the health department. And it was never really described as to what that money was for. What was the directed purpose of it? Well, the directed purpose of it was to expand government in any way possible. Hire more bureaucrats, expand the scope and breadth and power of those agencies, and just make it unwieldy so that the incoming administration or the next administration would have a very, very difficult time clawing it back. And, in me being the sometimes conspiracy theorist that I am, though, the more time goes by, the more removed I get from the tinfoil hat. But really, this is the Cloward and Piven strategy. Cloward and Piven were a couple of leftist, I guess, theorizers, leftist writers from the 60s and 70s, and their strategy was to overwhelm the system. That is, create so many dependents in the system that the current structure of it could not handle it. And so it would collapse under its own weight, and then whomever was in power could come in and reorganize everything. I mean, and it didn't just originate with these two people, Cloward and Piven. I mean, this has been the strategy of socialist governments for a very long time. Not to draw too strict of a parallel, but that's what happened with the brown shirts in pre-World War II Germany. They created chaos. When they'd created enough chaos and caused enough destruction, then the guy who was elected came in and said, well, I'll fix the problem for you. And boy, did he ever. But this is exactly the strategy, though not to the same extent that it happened in Germany, but is to create an overburdensome and overbearing government, and so much so that it is unwieldy for successive administrations. And so to claw all that back is a gargantuan task, and that's what we're seeing today. And think about this. For multiple years, folks have been employed at these agencies that have been overgrown and expanded. So now you have these people that are dependent upon their jobs, and they're entrenched in the current bureaucracy. So rooting them out is going to be very, very difficult. I mean, it's very much the same thing as pulling up the weed that's in between the pieces of your sidewalk. You know, you get most of the root and you think you got it, and then a couple of weeks later, here it is sprouting up again. But that's exactly what happened here, that we had government expand at such a rate that it's really, really hard to eradicate it. But fortunately, we're starting to pull some of that back. One of those places where we're pulling back is on climate change. Tulsi Gabbard was testifying in front of the Senate recently, and the Senate, man, they were ticked off that climate change has been removed from the list of national threats from the Daily Wire. And I quote, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, said on Tuesday that climate change was not included in the intelligence community's national threat assessment this year because she directed America's intelligence apparatus to focus on the most serious and immediate threats that the country faces. Gabbard made the remarks during a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing when Senator Angus King asked why global climate change was no longer deemed a national security threat. Quote, every single one of these reports that we've had has mentioned global climate change as a significant national security threat, except this one, King said. Has global climate change been solved? Why isn't this in the report? And who made the decision? On and on and on, as if, and it's not as if, but Angus King takes it for granted that climate change is a thing, that it's a threat, that we all have to face it. I mean, he is your stereotypic Democrat, that the idea that there never was a climate emergency has never entered his head. The idea that human beings are not so powerful that we can affect the climate. And just listen to him. I mean, you can hear in his voice that he's never once considered the idea that maybe climate change is not real. But listen to him anyway.
I want to move on. One note that surprised me, I've been on this committee now this is my 13th year. Every single one of these reports that we have had has mentioned global climate change as a significant national security threat, except this one. Has something happened? Has global climate change been solved? Why is that not in this report? And who made the decision that it should not be in the report when it's been in every one of the 11 prior reports?
I can't speak to the decisions made previously, but this annual threat assessment has been focused very directly on the threats that we deem most critical to the United States and our national security. Obviously, we're aware of occurrences within the environment and how they may impact operations, but we're focused on the direct threats to Americans' safety, well-being, and security.
How about how they will impact mass migration, famine, dislocation, political violence, which is the finding, by the way, of the 2019 annual threat assessment under the first Trump administration? You don't consider that a significant national security threat?
For the intelligence community, being aware of the environment that we're operating in is a given. What I focused this annual threat assessment on, and the IC focused this threat assessment on, are the most extreme and critical direct threats to our national security.
Okay, all right. It's enough of that. But you can tell that Angus King has never once considered the idea that maybe climate change is not a thing. Now, let me address why some of this happened during the first Trump administration. You know, Angus King he started out with saying the last 11 reports have included climate change. The reason for that is Trump had many of the people that were in the Obama administration in high positions in his government. And, really, I mean, it's almost becoming a cliche now to say that, well, Trump really wasn't all that prepared in his first administration. He didn't understand the depth of the deep state or the depth of all of these bureaucrats that were, in some cases, lifetime bureaucrats that were partisan, that then a lot of them that were absolutely put in during the Obama administration. So, yeah, a lot of them were still doing this climate change stuff when President Trump was in office the first time. Well, now, and then you had the Biden administration. So there's 4 years. So, and then, before Trump's first election, well, of course, there was Barack Obama. But all those people were still in there. And now here we are 11 years later, and we're finally starting to root out some of these deep state actors and remove them from the administration. Trump's moving fast and furious this time around and rooting out the rot that is in our government, and climate change is right at the top of the list. I mean, absolutely, it's been used as a money suck for a really long time. Thank God we're getting to it. I'll be back in just a second. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia, Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell, Iceland,
France. Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to continue to expand. The program is just unstoppable, with hundreds and hundreds and then thousands and thousands of people listening. It's Cowboy State Politics. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone, doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by God himself. That's right, my friends. I grew up and didn't know that I was going to love sitting behind a microphone. I always loved talking. Speech and debate was my thing in high school, and it paid for my college. And now here I am, the voice behind the silver microphone, Wyoming's most listened to conservative program. So welcome back to the program. Now, I know that many of us conservatives, we immediately, when Trump was elected, we thought, yep, the country is moving in the right direction. And it didn't take much more than a couple of minutes after those election results were final. The lovely Christine and I, we stayed up late to make sure there wasn't going to be any of this middle of the night business where ballots showed up and numbers changed. We were there until the very end. And I can tell you the next morning, I immediately thought, yep, we're moving in the right direction, because I knew what Trump was going to do. I mean, and I think most of us did. Even the Democrats. That's why they're so frantically objecting to everything that Trump does, because he's unwinding everything that the Biden administration did. And that the Democrats did too. I don't really think that Biden knew. I don't think it was that far into his presidency where he completely lost all of his marbles. But according to CNN, a big number of Americans think the country is on the right track, and that number is through the roof. And this is a piece I was going to bring to you yesterday, but we didn't quite get to it. But CNN senior reporter Harry Enton said Tuesday on CNN's News Central that the percentage of Americans who believe that the country is on the right track is through the roof. Enton said that all we talk about is how unpopular Donald Trump is, and it's CNN. And of course, that's pretty much what they do all the time. I mean, it's not a question of them doing anything different. That's the modus operandi of CNN and PMS, NBC, and CNBC, and all of them really. But it's Trump's approval rating is through the roof. Quote, here's what Enton said. All we talk about is how unpopular he is, but in reality, he's basically more popular than he was at any time, at any point in term number one, and more popular than he was when he won election back in November of 2024. Here he is saying it. And remember, this is on CNN. So when they have to admit the truth, the results are actually a lot bigger than what they're admitting. But here's CNN.
Let's start with this. Historically, you talk about Trump being sort of unpopular. What are the numbers showing us?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's important to do a little bit of reality check and take a little different spin at the numbers. I'm going to do that right here, because all we talk about is how unpopular Donald Trump is. But in reality, he's basically more popular than he was at any point in term number one, and more popular than he was when he won election back in November of 2024. What are we talking about? His net favorable rating right now comes in at -4 points. Compare that to where he was when he won in November of 2024, when he was at -7 points, or March of 2017, when he was at -10 points. So when you compare Trump against himself, he's actually closer to the apex than he is to the bottom of the trough. And of course, that's so important because Donald Trump, historically speaking, has had his numbers underestimated. So I think it's very important to compare him to himself to understand he's actually more popular now than he was when he won, or certainly where he was at this point back in his first term. The bottom line is Trump is more towards the ceiling than he is towards the floor.
So when you do that, it makes my knees hurt. So when you look at this compared to sort of historically, what does it tell you about the percentage of folks that think the country itself, with him at the helm, is on the right track?
This, I think, is rather important because, again, if the polls have historically underestimated Donald Trump, what is a metric that might get at understanding at how popular he may actually be? So let's take a look at the percentage of the country who say that we're on the right track. It's actually a very high percentage when you compare it to some historical numbers. What are we talking about?
Okay, enough of that. So even CNN is admitting that the number of people that approve of the direction our country is going is way more than it was in 2017. And I can tell you for a fact that personally, it was a sigh of relief when I woke up in the morning and Trump was the president. And by woke up in the morning, I mean was woke up at 2:00 in the morning by my wife at the time, who said, "Hey, you got to wake up and see this. Trump's the president." So, his popularity is higher now than it has ever been. And CNN is admitting that it's at the apex. But I think the important part of that soundbite is he said, historically, the polls have underestimated Donald Trump. And so the real number is probably much, much higher. So, it's good news all the way around, my friends. Just absolutely amazing. And, I'm excited to see where we're going to be in 2 years. And I think that, if the trend continues and we don't have another pandemic or something crazy like that, this country is going to, it's getting in one of Elon's rocket ships, and it's going where we haven't thought of before. And also places where people have not thought before are the Democrats. Now, I've told you about this a lot on the program, that really they have no plan. There's not a single one of them that has said, hey, this is how we need to fix it. This is where we need to take our party. Everything that they're focused on, and I do mean everything, is orange man bad. Republicans bad. Republicans going to destroy everything. They're fascists. They're and if you want any examples of that, listen to the audio that I played yesterday on the podcast. I just rehashed what happened at the Laramie Town Hall. And if you listen to what was being screamed at Harriet Hageman, that's the reaction that the Democrats have. Just resist, obstruct, protest. That's the only thing that they have, and there's nothing backing it up. And I think the most telling part of all that audio is when Harriet said, it's amazing how obsessed you guys are with government. And right after she said that, the crowd, explodes. The volume, the ambient volume in the room went way up, and you could tell that a majority of people in that room absolutely were 100% devoted to the federal government. And they thought that government should get bigger. And when you suggest that maybe government is too big and we ought to shrink it down, maybe down to its enumerated powers, the stuff that's in the Constitution, Democrats freak out. One of the people that can't figure out what's going on is Dick Durbin. And now Dick Durbin, he's been in the Senate for a really long time. And I think this is hilarious, but it's from Real Clear Politics. And it says, quote, Senator Dick Durbin to Ben Weingarten. What does wrong think mean? Did you make that up? Well, Dick Durbin, at the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee hearing on censorship of the industrial complex, asked contributor, Real Clear Politics investigation contributor, Ben Weingarten, for the definition of wrong think. And if the person that came up, and who the person was that came up with that term. The term wrong think is used in a similar context to thought crime, a term from George Orwell's 1984. And if you've ever read that, wrong think is being politically incorrect. It is saying something that is opposed to the current narrative of INGSOC. That was the party that was in power in 1984. Here's that piece of audio where Dick Durbin curiously can't figure out what the term wrong think is. Listen to it.
To characterize that event of January 6th as, quote, the riot used to launch the war on wrong think. What in the hell is wrong think? I can't keep up with all these words that are coming at us as brand new terms, and I hope it doesn't hide the fact that 140 policemen and women were here.
The important part of that was the first part, where he said where the person testifying said that January 6th was the first attempt to push back on wrong think. On the idea of wrong think, and that is that anything outside the currently accepted political narrative is thought crime, that it is being politically incorrect, that you are somehow creating a crime. And that's a lot of what Democrats are trying to do. That's what all the censorship is all about. And by the way, Zuckerberg and all those social media people, all of that was just virtue signaling when they said, we're going to do better. We're not going to censor stuff. Yeah. Well, none of them really meant it. And it was just trying to get in closer to the Trump administration because they realized it was going to make their lives a lot easier. But, and I don't know how deep the understanding of the Democrats' psychopathy is. What I'm getting at is I don't really understand if they get how deep their mental illness is. Remember yesterday I brought you the story of one state actually declaring Trump derangement syndrome to be a mental illness. Well, I think it is, because if you look at what the Democrats are doing, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. It's just a pathological dedication to opposing everything that is Donald Trump. And the suggestion that there might be another way of solving problems never entered the minds of any of these Democrats. Well, fortunately, we have Donald Trump here to change their mind, and we've got a lot of conservatives that got elected. So anyway, we're going to be working on that. Well, we've burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. make sure you don't miss tomorrow's episode. It's Open Line Friday tomorrow. And, that's the day where you can just call in and talk about whatever you want. You don't realize the extraordinary risk that I put myself in to just have the phone lines open and allow you to talk about whatever you want to talk about. So if you want to be part of the program, tomorrow's the day, Open Line Friday. Make sure that you don't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. If you do, you can go to the website and go up to the top, and there's a link that says Live Replay, and you can listen to all the previous episodes of this live program, and make sure that you're staying caught up on the podcast. There's a lot of big issues that I'm covering there. And if you want to find out what happens to the Sheridan Press, maybe you ought to stay tuned to that. But for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow.